By the mid-19th century, the Industrial Revolution had greatly changed the cities of both the United States as well as Canada. Goods such as standard cargo, meat, and fresh produce were now being shipped all over the country's larger cities via the railroad system. This also meant that trade between the United States and Canada were growing greatly. The only issue was that the process of transporting goods across the Detroit and St. Clair River was now slow due to the lack of a bridge. With the strong current of both rivers and the large amounts of ships, it was determined that the only way the goods could be transported was by using ferry systems to transport the rail cars across the rivers. These barges would run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only issue would be was that rail cars with produce and meats would often sit in the yard for days waiting for a chance to be transported across the river. Even with the early forms of refrigeration cars, much cargo would rot before even seeing the Canadian shores. It was determined that some other way of transporting the rail cars had to be developed. The task of developing and engineering a tunnel that would run under the St. Clair River was given to Joseph Hobson. He would develop what was known as the shield tunneling system. That was a group of large iron plates that would be formed together in a circle with access doors. The shield would be connected to a large steel ring, which was pushed by large hydraulic rods, sinking the ring and the shield into the slippery blue clay of the river bottom. Large plates would then be attached to the original ring, slowly forming a cast iron tube. The only issue was that as the system was moving along, it was difficult to keep water from sinking into the tube as it moved along, cutting its way through the mud. So it was determined that compressed air would be pumped into the tube along with the men working to keep the water at bay. What Hobson didn't know was that working in a compressed atmosphere would have an adverse reaction to his workers, who quickly started to report pains in their joints as well as their abdomen. We now know today that what the men were suffering from is what divers call the bends. Once it was determined what the issue was, workers would sit for periods of time in a form of decompression space between each shift. Since the project was to be completed as fast as possible, the same system was used on the Canadian side, working its way toward the Americans in the center of the river. The tunnel cost $2.7 million to construct, and on September 12, 1891, the tunnel was opened with celebrations on both sides of the border. The tunnel would begin to transport cargo back and forth via the coal-driven locomotives for a very short time, when it was discovered that the smoke from the locomotives was creating hazardous conditions in the tunnel, taking the lives of several Grand Trunk employees. Large fans were installed at each end of the tunnel to help alleviate the problem until a better solution could be devised. In 1908, the coal-powered locomotives were switched to electric locomotives, eliminating the hazardous smoke filling the tunnel. This tunnel would remain in operation until 1994, when it was determined that modern rail systems using stacked auto racks were not able to fit through the original tunnel. In 1995, Canadian National brought in Excalibur, a modern-day drilling device, to cut a new tunnel that would accommodate the modern-day railroad needs. The original 1901 tunnel sits quietly now alongside of the new tunnel, reminding us of an engineering marvel of the early 20th century.